Hello everyone and welcome. I have just had one of the best guided tours of a heritage site in my entire life. And the weirdest thing was, I weren't even there. I was at home in my living room in front of my screen. And I think I would have sworn that a virtual tour could ever be so good. I think a lot of museum and heritage professionals especially feel that, oh no, you have to be on site. You have to be in the actual place where this specific historic event happened. You have to absolutely be there. And I thought, what a brilliant excuse for talking about virtual tours, because this one was fantastic. And I'm going to use it as an example for this video and for diving into virtual tours and what it is they do when they function best. As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add your comments, you know what to do. Let's get into this. So, you know, when you've worked in a sector for a long time, you kind of get a little, well, biased, I guess is the word, because it's very difficult to be impressed sometimes when you attend an exhibition or a heritage activity or event or something, because you always have those professional glasses on, you know, so you always look for, okay, what tools are they using here? What methods are in use? How are they layering the narrative, the interpretation, all of that going on? And it kind of makes it difficult for you to be captivated by a story. And it's a real shame, I think, but I sometimes find that I really have to distance myself a little bit from sort of that professional attitude and just allow myself to be captured by a good story. So when that happens, it's so wonderful and so great, because it means you're completely in the story and not really so concerned about what went on method-wise or tool-wise in an attempt to get this piece of interpretation across. Then you can start thinking about that afterwards, maybe. But this was a fantastic tour that really showed not just how to create a very deep emotional connection, but also a very professional connection as to how to make people feel like they are on site, they are actually there, even though they're sitting at home in front of their computer screens or their phones. So let's dive into what it is that makes a good virtual tour, how we can keep honing our virtual tours for the future, and what it is we need to be aware of when we layer our storytelling and our interpretation to suit a virtual audience. So everyone, I'm sure that you recognize this famous entrance. It's from Auschwitz-Birkenau, or rather Auschwitz-Birkenau 1. Because Auschwitz was, of course, not just a concentration camp, it was a huge concentration complex, and it was vast. But they have the most amazing virtual tours I've ever seen, and the one I attended was absolutely amazing. And as I said, I wasn't even there, which was one amazing aspect of this. But the other was, when I booked this tour online, I was told when I was booking that it lasted about 2 hours. And when I saw that, I thought, no way. There's no way they can hold on to visitors' attention online for that long. When you're sitting at home, there are going to be other distractions. There's no way you're going to keep someone's attention for that long. But I have to tell you, those 2 hours, I don't know where they went. They were just gone. This was amazing, captivating storytelling, and they certainly have something to show in Auschwitz. But let me just tell you about the setup, and then also mix it a little bit with some examples on how we can think about virtual tours and how we can create the best possible setup for this. So let's just have a look at this. First of all, set the scene. So give visitors the correct log-on information. Now this was the screen that popped up when you logged onto the tour, and we were waiting to be for the tour to start and to be let in. And we had this little, of course, the Auschwitz logo there. Their virtual tours are called Auschwitz-Birkenau in front of your eyes. And in the photo there, you can see they have used a close-up of some of the prisoners' eyes there. They actually change them from time to time, but obviously it's a very strong message to send out. And of course, the whole point of these virtual tours are that we should never forget. And then you're given various informations on the screen there. Your tour will begin shortly, and this changed as we were waiting to be let in. And they told us how long the tour would last. They told us what would happen, that we could ask questions of the guide along the way on the live tour, that we had access to a chat room, so we could chat between us, and also that we would have access to a map of the camp along the way, so that we could always see where we were, which gave us a great idea about, you know, the vastness of this complex, and also how long it would take roughly to get from, for example, one block to the next and so on. So really set the scene, let people know what's going to happen and how they can access various informations. And then we started with an intro video, maybe 2-3 minutes long. That just gave you an introduction with some very nice photos of the complex, and of course with like a map that gave you an idea about where, of course, Auschwitz is located in Poland, but also the complex in itself, what it consisted of. And there were various photos from the Auschwitz archives there of prisoners, but also of what went, a very brief introduction to what went before this camp, what was actually idea behind the camp. And as I said, very important from the start, inform visitors about the details, the timetables, the additional features that you can access along the way on your screen, so that they know in advance, and make it as simple as possible. And then, of course, we were introduced to our guide. He could turn the camera around as he went from place to place. We started in Auschwitz I. And in the top photo there, you can see that I have entered the map. In the corner, there's a little yellow icon. And when you click that, you got a map of Auschwitz I. And he explained to us, this was an English tour, of course, he explained to us where the different famous sites were located and what we would be looking at first of all. And then there would be a little break, roughly sort of 45 minutes, an hour into the tour, and he would move from Auschwitz I and approximately 2 kilometers away to Auschwitz II, where the tour would continue. And along the way, as we went around the enormous complex, we would see various photos and drawings and various archives material as he was telling us about them. For example, there, the top photo, he was telling us about how they would mark the prisoners. We all know the famous yellow Jew stars of the Jew there, but there were also, of course, other prisoners like homosexuals and gypsies and so on, and they all had their different color, their different mark on them, so you could recognize them. And we would also see, for example, the right photo there, when we walked down a long pathway where prisoners would arrive, we would see various photos as they had them sort of overlapping the live tour pictures. So we could see, for example, a group of children being separated and arriving there in the place where that would take place.
And this was an amazing feature for an online tour, because of course you don't have that when you are visiting on site. Then you have to either rely on a guide or an audio guide, or of course on exhibition material. Another amazing thing about doing virtual tours is that you were given access to some behind the scenes features that visitors on site did not have access to. One of them being a little look into the famous Block 10 at Auschwitz, which was where, I'll get back to that one, but this was where some of the medical experiments took place. Not a very pleasant site, but really, really interesting in its own right. So one of the amazing things about doing virtual tours and creating a sort of remote engagement, if you like, is that you have global access, of course, to history. Not everyone can go to Auschwitz. I have to confess, I've never been myself. I've always wanted to go. But that's probably one of the most compelling aspects of virtual tours, that they allow people from all over the world to experience historically significant sites without the need to travel. And this also means that you can have a very diverse audience visiting, including those who might never be able to visit, perhaps due to financial or geographical or physical barriers. Another great aspect, of course, is bringing the emotion to the screen. Now you have access to some amazing archive material here in the form of live testimonials, and I'll show you some of these later. We had drone footage, so aerial footage as well, close-up of personal items like drawings, artifacts, and it was really, really easy to create that emotional bridge and to help people to connect with the space even though they weren't physically there. Now, some of the techniques and visual techniques that can enhance the immersion of a virtual tour is you really need to make sure you have seamless integration of the various multimedia there. And that can be, for example, aerial views and drone footage, like I said, and we had loads of those. Aerial shots of Auschwitz II and Birkenau especially, because that part of the site is so massive, and it's really hard to get a sense of the massive scale of these places without aerial shots or maps. So to help understand, without being on site, these shots were actually really, really good. And at the same time, you could have the guide's voice live telling you about what you saw in these various aerial photos. Like a very, very quick example here is from Auschwitz II, also known as Auschwitz-Birkenau. And we got actually a rather good introduction to I think it was the third gas chamber, second or third. If you look at the top right photo there, a lot of these sites were, of course, completely destroyed by the Germans towards the end of the war in an attempt to try and destroy all kind of evidence that these places had existed. And so they are mostly ruins nowadays. But these aerial shots were actually amazing when it came to giving you an idea about the layout, where did people enter, where was the actual gas chamber, how many people could they fit in, what happened when they started to gas people in these chambers, how did they go about that, how long did it take before everyone had died, what happened afterwards when they had to gather all the bodies to get them to the crematorium, and all of that. And it's actually a massive logistic operation if you want to kill so many people in such a short time. And of course, that was the entire purpose of especially Auschwitz II. Auschwitz I also had a gas chamber, but it didn't have the capacity of the gas chambers, the same capacity as the gas chambers in Auschwitz II. So this was really an attempt of creating the most effective killing machine, you might say. And we have another photo there of, I think it was the third gas chamber. but it's a massive site, and it's not actually that hard when you have the aerial photos and the maps, and you have the live voice of the guide to imagine what these specific buildings look like. And mixed with real-time interaction, this aspect, this live aspect of the tour, where the guide or survivors share their insights in real time, this creates a really interactive element where visitors feel as though they are part of an ongoing conversation. And it really deepens the engagement. It's a very powerful way of also creating a personal engagement. You really feel like you are on site here. Creating a sense of presence is another really interesting aspect of doing virtual tours, because of course you have these 360-degree views and the walkthroughs, and you are also capable of seeing or accessing bits that are not normally open to visitors on site, which is such a luxury when you think about it. And to have a very clear look around and feel as if you are physically in the space. And that technique really adds a sense of realism, and it allows for a very self-directed exploration, actually. When you have layered soundscapes, that's another technique that's really good. Sound is an important part of making virtual spaces feel real. So you can have, of course, you can put in music or ambient sounds, footsteps, wind, distant voices, or outdoor sounds like birds or something, to create an atmosphere of a historical site and to make it more immersive. But a lot of the time, the place in itself will carry an atmosphere and sounds it itself. Maybe when a guide enters a building, there is a bit of an echo going on or something like that actually adds to that. But layered soundscape is something that's really worth considering as well on guided tours, like you layer images and photos on top of the live photos as well. Now, first-person storytelling, these testimonials, which of course Auschwitz is full of, from people who lived through the events, sometimes they were survivors, historians, witnesses, that can really help ground the virtual tour in a personal narrative. And this personal connection gives visitors the feeling that they are walking alongside someone who has intimate knowledge of the place. And it makes it more than just a virtual experience. And I just want to show you a couple of screenshots I took along the way from survivors from the Auschwitz archives and how they integrated these into the live tour. So, for example, if you look at the right photo first of Sol Rosner there, you have him on the screen. He's in a little video. He's telling his story. And he was just a young boy when he arrived. And as we stand there on the live tour next to those famous train tracks that leads into Auschwitz II, he's telling about what it was like to arrive. And he was separated from his family, but he was put in a line alongside his father. So probably a line for the men that were fit to work. And he's telling us about that there as we're standing there next to these famous train tracks. And the top testimonial account, the lady there tells about what it was like when they arrived to the barracks. And she explains how she couldn't see her mother and her sister because they had been taken into a building. And when they came out, they didn't have any hair. They had been shaved and they were bald, and she didn't recognize them at first. And she's telling about what it was like arriving to the barracks. Now, the lower left testimonial account is from a lady who was actually in the famous Block 10 in Auschwitz I, which is where they conducted a lot of the scientific and medical experiments. And it was also where a lot of the camp doctors had their offices. Among others, I think a very famous one we probably have all heard of is the famous Joseph Mengele, who did a lot of his experiments there. A lot of the medical experiments were focused on sterilization. And the lady there at the bottom explains how she was put onto this wooden table and she was examined and injected in her vagina with a substance to sterilize her, and she explains how it makes her feel very unwell. She got very sick, it burned inside her, she had a very high temperature, she felt very sick, she couldn't really walk, and then the next day she was taken back and examined again to make sure that it had the desired effect. And a large part of the experiments that took place had to do with sterilization. But of course, Mengele also conducted famously a lot of experiments on twins or triplets. So a lot of really not very nice things took place in Block 10. But the real-time interaction is a very, very important and very powerful technique of the virtual tour. Now, a couple of other things I also want to mention is the inclusivity that virtual tours often have. As I said, you can access even though you might not be physically capable of accessing or have the financial means to travel and so on, but there are also various language and accessibility options. There is the possibility of having multi-language audio guides, subtitles, and offering sign languages and descriptive audio and so on as well. Also, you can adapt your tour for different devices. Now, a very important part of this tour was that we were made aware before we logged on of the browser type that would support this virtual tour. And I was actually very happy about that, because it turned out the browser I normally use wasn't good for this tour. So simply knowing that in advance meant I could use another browser. And just knowing that in advance is, of course, a huge advantage. Also, making sure the tour is adaptable to various platforms ensures inclusivity for people without, high-end technology. And something like pacing and user control is quite important as well. Giving users control over the pace of their experience can allow those with different needs, for example, let's say cognitive disabilities or attention differences, to take in the information at their own speed. And this can actually make a huge difference to guided tours, because obviously when you're doing a tour on site, it's a lot harder to take everybody's needs and wishes into consideration. You kind of have to follow a certain pace there as you move along. Now, another thing I want to mention is, of course, when you are at a site like Auschwitz, there is certain ethical considerations as well, because this is, of course, also a memorial. And balancing the educational and emotional impact becomes hugely important. So you have I would call it a challenge, actually, to balance this, because some people are there for the educational purpose, others are there for the emotional weight of it. And it is possible to actually create a respectful type of storytelling, but also present historical facts and personal stories without sort of creating a trauma or exploiting the pains of those involved. And one way that this particular tour did that incredibly well, I was really impressed by that, was there were certain places where the guide said, so we are stepping now out into such and such space, and I'm just going to be quiet as I walk you through this space. One of these spaces were a little courtyard between block 10 and 11. 10 where the medical experiments took place, and 11 was the prison in Auschwitz. And there was a little courtyard in between those two blocks where the first prisoners of Auschwitz had been shot. And as you can see, there's still flowers and lights and so on being placed there. And he always kept quiet when he entered that space out of respect. And in a way, that didn't just give us as visitors an opportunity of just reflecting of what we had heard and to take it all in. It also gave us an opportunity of just looking and taking in the visual side of this little courtyard, and give you time to process the information you have just had. So pauses and silence is actually an incredible, powerful tool to have on your online tour. It sounds mad because obviously you want to make sure that people are engaged and you have their attention all the time. But silence was incredibly powerful, and I would argue not just when you want to show respect, but also maybe create spaces where you just have sound effects, maybe music or something going on in the background, and then show visitors a site without necessarily talking. Just show them around a room or something without necessarily talking. That was incredibly powerful, and it also gave visitors a chance of just reflecting and having a little bit of a break. Now, we have already talked about the personal accounts and testimonials there, but there is a sensitivity to this as well in cultural and historical context, because when creating virtual tours of sensitive sites, like, for example, memorials or battlefields or places where tragedies took place and so on, there is a need for accuracy and respect for those cultural and historical and personal narratives. And inclusivity in this context also means ensuring the voices of those most affected by the event are prominently featured. And of course, personal accounts, if you have them, is always probably one of the best ways of doing that, but it's also a wonderful way of showing that sensitivity. Now, I just want to show you a couple of other photos here from the virtual tour, because they were wonderfully presented and done. You have some photos there from the sleeping barracks, and the bottom right photo there, apologies, it's very, very dark, but that was actually from Block 11, the prison where various forms of torture took place. Among others, they had starving rooms. They also had standing rooms where you could only stand up, and various other forms of torture taking place of prisoners there. But very, very powerful. And also a lot of these were actually behind the scenes. So that's why you don't see any other visitors there, because the guide could take us there, even though they're normally closed off. And then I kind of wanted to show you this as well, because in the middle of this tour, we had a little break because the guide needed to get from Auschwitz I and approximately 2 kilometers away to Auschwitz II Birkenau, which is the biggest part of this whole complex. And there were about, I think, 5 or 10 minutes break. And during that time, there were music and changing images on the screen. So you had there little information. Your tour will regroup after the break, the Auschwitz logo again, and then changing aerial and personal images with a little bit of music going on, just setting the atmosphere there again, but letting people know we are going to be back. And towards the end of the break, there was a little watch that started to count down when there were 2 minutes left off the break. So a very efficient, very simple way of doing that. Now, this photo, of course, being of the famous entrance to Auschwitz II, Auschwitz-Birkenau. You were coming in there. You came by train, of course. One of the train wagons there has been reconstructed to show what the conditions were like for prisoners. Actually, up to 20% of the prisoners died before they even reached Auschwitz. So about 1/5 never even came to Auschwitz because they died in the train carriages on the trip. And you may argue that perhaps that was preferred, all things considered. But a very, very powerful effect of that entrance, and you see other visitors there, especially groups of educational groups with like school children and students walking around the side as well there. Actually a very beautiful day, which was a stark contrast to what was taking place. It was very sunny and blue sky, as you can tell. Now, innovative tools for engagement when you are creating a virtual tour can be these live interaction, for example, a Q&A as well. And towards the end of the first bit, when we were in Auschwitz I, and also towards the end of the second bit, when the tour was finishing, we had the opportunity of turning on our cameras and our audio and ask the guide questions directly. And this was a very, very direct and personal way of engaging as well, allowing visitors to ask questions, get real-time responses, make visitors feel connected and engaged as though they were attending a live event or being guided around in person. Very, very effective. If you have the opportunity to use forms of augmented or virtual reality, of course, that's another possibility to sort of let visitors see the past while walking through. But actually, in a way, the historical photos served the same purpose here. Now, of course, historical photos may not be something you have access to in at all sites, especially not sort of archaeological sites, but there can be various other forms of recreations or maps of buildings and so on that can be put instead, but a very effective way of letting visitors see the past, if you like. Finally, I just wanted to touch on the emotional power of virtual tours, because a virtual tour can evoke strong emotional reactions, not just because, this happened to be Auschwitz, and of course there's a strong emotional reaction there, but despite being physically distant, visitors can feel a profound emotional connection to a place through storytelling, visuals, and the weight of history. And that also creates space for reflection. So the need for virtual tours to provide moments of pause, of silence, of reflections, especially when dealing with, traumatic events like battlefields or concentration camp, but also generally allow visitors time to reflect on what they have just seen and heard. If you want to, you can have maybe music or something play, depending on the atmosphere you want to set, but something playing in the background, so it's not just silence, but actually sometimes silence, especially at memorials, can work very, very, very well and be really, really powerful. So these quiet, contemplative moments in the tour, like aerial shots with no narration, can help visitors process what they have just seen and heard, and it can be really, really powerful. Now, of course, when you reach the end of the tour, make sure that you have a nice goodbye as well. Let us see the guide's face again so that we know who we're saying goodbye to after everyone has asked their questions and so on. And if you can, have a little outro video in the same way this particular tour had an intro video. So a way of setting the atmosphere, saying goodbye. Also, of course, additional information if you want to come visit, or if you want to seek out more information, you have the opportunity of doing that. We were also given, we were led back after the tour actually to this little site on the website where we could look out for more educational information, photo material, and so on. And just allowing visitors to figure out, where can I find more information? Where can I actually seek out more information, and where can I get to know more? A wonderful way of introducing that towards the end of a virtual tour there. I feel some of the things that made this tour so very special was that you were constantly being informed about the process and the next steps by the guide. And you felt you saw a lot, also a lot more than what you would have seen on site, not just in terms of things you had access to that you wouldn't have had access to on site, but also in terms of archive materials, photos, and so on. The map helps you to understand the size of the place, and this is vast. It really, really was. So if you have a very huge space where you can't show everything on a virtual tour, or a place that you just need to get an idea about the size of it, a map and aerial views are just amazing for doing that. And again, it's relatively simple. And then that that very personal connection that you get when you're on a live tour, because you feel you have a connection with the guide there. And as I said, it's not easy, it's not difficult for a place like Auschwitz to create an emotional account, because the place is kind of formed for that purpose. You have it almost before you enter or before you even log on to a virtual tour. So you don't really have to dial that aspect up when you have a place like Auschwitz. And there can be other historical sites where that's not necessary, where you already have a very strong emotional story within your overall storytelling. But in that case, focus on making those stories present so that people feel they are there. Make sure you create that presence alongside the emotional context. That can be incredibly powerful. And then I just have to point out that the technical connection for this was really good. There was only like a couple of times where I felt the photo, the live photo froze, but only for a couple of seconds, and then it came back. So the connection and the technical setup was clearly there, and they had access to technical support as well. So you could actually contact a technical supporter there who could help you out if you had problems, but there weren't actually any of those. And then you had the personal discussion towards the end where you could actually see the other participants that of course could be sitting on the opposite side of the globe, for that matter, and joining you for this. And you had the opportunity of chatting with them, of talking directly to the guide on screen. He could see you if you turned your camera on. So there was actually a very strong personal connection as well. And I think that was part of why these 2 hours just flew and why this was such an amazing experience. Sometimes it was very, very simple tools and methods that was in use. And sometimes, of course, a lot of work and preparation had gone into bits of these, but not more than I would say a lot of sites would be capable of. So I was actually really impressed by this. And I'd never imagined a virtual tour could be like this. This was really something different, and with relatively simple means and tools and methods. So I can only take my hat off to the organizers at Auschwitz for this experience.
Okay, so over to you guys. Have you attended a fantastic virtual tour? Have you created one? What's some of the most important things that a good virtual tour absolutely needs to capture in order to keep audiences' attention? How are audience attention spans different when we're sitting at home online compared to when we are on site? Because we also know that something like museum fatigue can be a thing when you are guiding visitors on site, because maybe they're walking a lot, maybe you are asking them to stand a lot or to listen a lot. So how can we make sure that we keep visitors' attention? How is it different when we're doing virtual tours compared to on-site tours? How can we keep honing virtual tours to be the best they can possibly be and actually function in their own right and not just be a kind of appetizer for coming on a visit, on a physical visit? So please share your thoughts, share your experiences. If you have links to fantastic virtual tours, please share them as well. And as always, add your comments below.